Good evening, hello and welcome to the second round of the IIFL World International Junior Chess Tournament 2016. The tournament is in progress at the Mount Litra International School 2000 International School Bandra in Bandra complex. It is located at the heart of Mumbai. Many such junior tournaments are held over the world, but what stands out in this tournament is its whooping prize fund of a total of 7.5 lakhs. This revolutionary prize fund will give the first prize winner a check of 1.5 lakhs, which is the highest ever in any tournament all over the world.
Now, speaking of this tournament, it was the idea of head instructor Praful Zaveri who first visited. When he went to Dubai, he noticed that the tournament in Dubai was carrying a very high prize fund, and many Indians were playing in that tournament. And while he was there, the idea came to him that why not have a tournament better than this in India itself. And well, over the years, Prabhu Zaveri has contributed in many ways to the development of chess in Mumbai, and I think it's only natural that he was the person who went ahead and brought this idea into fruition by holding this IIFL with Mumbai International Chess Tournament for the juniors aged below 13 years of. So I think this is one of his major contributions to Mumbai chess, and this will go a long way in shaping the future of chess in this city. And I guess not just a city, even in in this country. So, of course, as Shubham rightly pointed out, a very unique event with live transmission of games, broadcast and commentary, and of course, an extremely high price fund for a junior tournament of this class. Players from India uh, and some other countries, a couple more countries are participating. Most notably, there's a contingent of 3-4 players, I think, from Nepal, and the top seed himself is from Bangladesh, which is a very unique. I mean, it's a junior tournament in India in Mumbai, and we have a top seed from Bangladesh. So I think it's a very good start for this tournament, and we already witnessed the round one yesterday, and the games were not that fighting, in the sense because it is the first round and the players are usually top seeds get the lower rated players who don't give much of a challenge, and consequently the games finish early. The best game of the day from the junior event yesterday was played by a certain Goan kid by the name Luke Mendonca. He's I think around 9-10 years old, and the kid is extremely bright. Uh, into speaking of juniors and kids like Luke, there are many more games going on today. We are into the second round of the tournament.
Well, there is another feature of this tournament that completely stands out. The tournament has just one round per day, with a time control of 5 hours for one game. It is completely revolutionary for this particular age group. Generally, we witness 4-hour events. However, this time control is generally seen in Asian events and world events in age groups.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's very rightly said by Praful Zaveri sir that a time control which is played in Asian and world events should also be implemented in the local lower level events.
Correct, and that makes the players stronger.
Definitely.
And that much better when they play in those tournaments.
They definitely get used to it, which helps them in the longer run.
Yeah. So I think it's time we move on to some games and try and see what's going on in these games. Yeah. Uh, the first game which we are going to witness is between and Mohammad Fahad Rahman and Vincent Alaina, who is rated 1362. Mohammad Fahad Rahman is of course 2278 and is the top seed of the event. Uh, so I think we should go ahead with this game. Let's go to the start of the game, which the game started at 4:30, by the way, and that means we are quite into the middle game stage of the game. So coming to the game, let us get these things, slight technical things right. I think we are properly placed now. Perfect. Let's go forward. C4, the English opening, knight f6, and then we have knight c3, e6, e4. So this is basically the Mikenas-Skulls attack, which was made famous due to the kind of trappy nature it has. Okay, there is a particular line which I enjoy a lot. I mean myself. Many players end up playing c5 here in this position. Just hold on. Yeah. e6. Okay, just hold on, just hold on. Wait. Okay, e4. Is this particular variation with c5? Yes, it looks like there's some technical difficulty here. Okay, so let's just see c5.
It's apparently not coming.
Yeah. Anyway, c5. Then white goes e4 here, e5 here, which is attacking the knight, and
Knight has to go behind the G8.
yeah, knight has to go behind to g8, or I mean, this is basically very good for white. Then black has to reroute the knight to g6 via e7, which gives to typical positions where white has a bit more space. Like personally, I kind of enjoy these positions, and there are many more trappy. It's very trappy in nature, this particular opening, and there are good reasons why. For example, there's another variation e4. For example, here if let's go back. Let's see what happened in the game. Black played d6, which is a very solid option here, basically. D4 and NBD7, knight F3. Hold on, let's look at this position. What's happening?
Okay, here actually what has happened is black has resorted to an old Indian defense with a move delay.
Correct. Yeah.
The old Indian defense generally arises after d4, knight f6, c4, d6, knight c3, knight b d7, and knight f3, e5.
E5. Direct. It's a direct.
So what has happened here basically is played his pawn to e6 and then to e5.
So basically, black is already a tempo down when he starts the game, and is again tempo down by due to this particular thing. So I think white can already start claiming a slight edge. I think.
Surely as a range.
Yeah.
So tempo.
I think more than just a tempo, because black already loses a tempo because he starts second.
Yeah.
Black is already a tempo behind on this. This is the second tempo he lost, I guess. So yeah, I think white can claim an advantage here, a slight advantage.
So let's move forward. Bishop e2 was played. Bishop e7, quite natural. Castling.
Now, okay, there are some moves here. There have been some games which have been played in from this particular position. Although this is very bad for black, some players have ended up coming into this position. The most famous moves here have been Bishop d3, which has a, not so surprisingly, 100% record. Okay, but Bishop d3, I think in this position the point is, I think, to control the f5 square and put some pressure on those light squares, especially the f5 one, because of the knight bd7 move. The square is weak in my opinion, so I think this makes sense. Going back though, what was played is qc2.
It's pretty natural.
Yeah.
White tries to bring his rook to d1 and try to just pressurize.
It's a developing move. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
good.
nice.
Correct. b6. Okay, now b6. The point looks like it looks like the point is he just wants to. I think the point looks like he just wants to develop the bishop. But where would you like to develop the bishop?
It's not particularly clear. I mean, Bishop b7 looks like the intended idea.
However, there's a possibility that you can just go c5 and Bishop a6.
Yes, that's another possibility. Just blocking the center.
Blocking the center and making way for the bishop. Like the c4 pawn becomes a weakness of sorts, although it's not a weakness per se, but still. Yeah, that looks like a plan. Let's see how it went. D to e5. Okay, white prefers to not play d5 because what I think the point is that if I just go d5, maybe the c4 pawn really becomes a bit of a.
I think another reason why d5 is not too good is closing the center will generally nullify the effect of being a tempo ahead.
Good.
So that's the point.
That may be a good point. So if white is a tempo ahead, it only makes sense to keep the position open. Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, moving ahead, we have d into e5.
D into e5. Good move.
D into e5. Rook d1, only natural. Bishop d6. Okay, now the position. Although I'm not sure if what the computer thinks or what it is objectively, but certainly white has lots of pressure on black, particularly because the d file. I mean, it's very unusual to have this kind of setup, and I mean, it's very unusual to say that black is all right after landing in a position where the rook is pinning two pieces to the queen. So it's a relative pin. However, I think white can still claim an edge here.
Another point to be noted is the bishop on d6 is slightly awkwardly placed here.
So knight b5 becomes a natural move.
Knight b5 definitely becomes a natural move. The
Which
bishop
is-
would have been slightly better placed maybe on c5 with the queen on e7, which looks like a more harmonious setup.
So would you think that something like this makes sense?
Bishop c5 immediately runs into knight into e5.
Correct. So that can't happen.
Yeah, the knight on d7 is pinned.
So the pawn on e5 is hanging. That's the main point.
Yeah.
So I think what white ended up playing is only natural. Knight.
So knight b5.
Yeah, knight b5. We have qe7. Now after knight into e7, white certainly has an advantage, a static advantage at least, because of the bishop pair in a not that open, but still, pretty much open position.
The weakness on d6 also counts.
Yeah, exactly. And I certainly am sure that white went ahead with that. Yes, he did.
Surprisingly, white
He
went-
did, but first he preferred to play knight e1. So the idea looks like to be maybe he just wants
to reroute the knight.
Yes, maybe he just wants to reroute the knight, or maybe he has some more plans.
Okay, I see. Maybe he wants to go knight d6, c d6, then knight d3, knight b4.
Makes a lot of sense.
Knight is going to d5, c6. Targeted
That's
good
very
squares.
good planning actually. Knight d3, knight d3, knight b4, knight c6, or knight d5. Now the point obviously is that now white goes knight into d6, which forces c d6, and now knight d3, knight b4 becomes possible. c6 square is weak, the d5 square is weak. White is clearly better, almost very clearly better in that, if that particular idea comes to flotation, and black ends up helping white get the same thing, which is very funny. Although not that strange considering that black is not that highly rated either. So knight into d6 looks natural now, and now white I think goes ahead with his plan, f3,
Strengthening the center first,
and also restricting the bishop, which comes to b7. Bishop g5. Of course, the d5 square is the point of contention. So bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, rook c8. Of course, something like
b5 is in there. Something like b5 is in there. With
yes,
c4
that's the whole
pinned.
point behind this. It's a relative pin, and b5 is the most obvious threat which we can see right now. So I think there are not too many methods, and one of the most straightforward moves is what white ended up playing.
Queen d2. Very natural, just targeting the pawn on d6.
And yeah, it's. I mean, I'm not sure what objectively this position might be, but okay, white has clear. Statically, white should be better.
Yeah, he has to be better. And with the pawn on d6 threatened, attacked by two pieces and defended by just one, rook c6 nothing but natural.
Yeah, and now b4, b5 becomes a plan.
Yeah, very true.
And that's another plan with knight c2. Knight d3 isn't logical because it reduces the activity of it. And of course, the c4 pawn falls. Although I'm not sure. Okay, knight d3, rook c4, knight e5, knight e5. So I think the c4 pawn is falling there. But in any case, knight c2, knight b4, knight d5 is a very natural plan. Okay, knight c. If the knight lands on b4 anyway, the d6 pawn falls. Otherwise, you lose the exchange. So yeah, knight c2, a5 is only natural to control the square, and now again b4, b5 is a very natural move. I won't be surprised if white plays that. Yes,
the white knight still can go to d5, and the route will be knight e3 d5 instead of knight b4 d5.
Yeah, but knight e3, I'm not too sure because I think knight d3, of course, I mean there's a possibility with something like g6. If knight d5, then knight into d5, q into d5, then I have some tactical problems, I think, with something like.
You need not go to the d5 square immediately. I think controlling that square in itself is achievement.
Yeah, possibly, but okay, I'm not really. Okay, knight e3. first of all, it doesn't look natural. And however, yeah, 93 is a good plan. B4 is much more natural because it makes a lot of sense to just
And
disturb
that was
the
what
rook on this. Okay, I think we jumped ahead a bit. Hold on. So yes, here we are. Knight C2, A5, B4, much more natural. Uh,
and
Going
we
ahead.
rook
C.
C8, rook
Okay.
F8.
Okay, the point is it a move which has a point that it's pointless. I mean, look at this.
I think the question here to be asked before say rook F8 is, what can black do here?
Maybe
It's not very clear as to what plan black will have in this particular position.
I mean I don't know. Maybe something. I mean, I'd go back a bit here probably. Let's try something here. Knight B4 is the point. So why not do something like rook C8 here? I mean, knight B4. Okay, then I have rook C5. Something
Now you
like
can
that.
show it. You can show it. Like.
Yeah, so let's try this thing out.
Okay, rook F8 here.
Yeah, rook FC8. Okay, there's some technical issue here, I think. Rook C8. Hmm. We can't make the move, it seems.
Nevertheless, I think rook F8 is. I'm not too sure. I'm not convinced with the move because knight B4 is anyway on the way.
Rook C5.
To just grab the pawn on D6.
Yeah, but then I just sacrifice and play. I get at least get some activity.
I'm not too sure about it because the B6 pawns are also under pressure. I'm threatening to capture bishop into F6.
I don't know. Rook C5. Okay, Rook C5, Bishop. Okay, it's lost anyway. So maybe A5 is 4.
A5 here is like.
But A5 is losing anyway because I have some other plans as well. Knight A3, Knight B5 becomes natural.
For the more uninitiated viewers, A5 is losing in a sense it's positionally lost.
Yeah. So A5, B4 is what was played. It just occurred to me that White could have even tried after A5. White could maybe have tried something like Knight A3.
That surely looks interesting.
Because
That's
knight B5 and then the D6 pawn falls. However, maybe White thought, okay, Knight A3, Bishop A6, Knight B5, Bishop into C into is not necessary because then the B6 pawn is not. I mean, it becomes so much more difficult to attack those weaknesses. Maybe that was the point behind his whole plan with B4. And okay,
I think we need to take stock of this position and explain our viewers as to why exactly this position is better for White.
Yeah.
The first point which this stands out in this position is the weakness of the pawn on D6.
Correct.
The pawn on D6 lies on an open file and is a backward pawn, which makes it terribly weak.
Correct.
Secondly, as we know, the pawn in front of the weak pawn is always the square in front of the weak pawn is always a target.
Yeah.
The principle goes first restrain, then block it, then destroy.
The Nemzovich principle.
Yeah. So here, I think these two things coupled together give White an obvious advantage. Coupled with that, there is the bishop on H4, which pins the knight on F6, making the D5 square safe haven for a White knight.
Correct. And okay, speaking of all that, we should also point out the importance of pawn breaks such as B4. I mean, there's a very famous book by an international master named Axel Smith, where the book is named Pump Up Your Rating, which is, I think, many strong players suggest it to be a very good and useful book.
I would like to note that it's an award-winning book.
Yeah, it has won, I think, more than just one awards. And the very first chapter in that book stresses the importance of pawn breaks. The thing is, the idea is that if there is no pawn lever, there's no plan. Here, the most obvious pawn lever for White, a move back if you see, is B4. There are other pawn levers like F4, but that doesn't make sense.
It just weakens the pawn on E4, so you can't do F4 then.
B4, on the other hand, makes a lot of sense because, okay, it's an obvious pawn break, and it also makes way for a move like D5, which wins the pawn on D6. A very good move, a pawn break. So that was the plan after all.
It's impressive to see such a young kid. I mean, just positionally outplaying his opponent.
Yeah, yeah, and okay, it's true that his opponent is not that high rated, but that doesn't take away the fact that the White player just understands the position much better, and Maybe that's why he's higher rated.
Very good.
So okay, rook f c8.
Rook f8 was played and b5. Quite natural, considering the fact that pawn on d6 is weak.
Yeah, and now you just pick the
c7.
pawn at will. You don't even need to pick it up immediately.
You don't need to rush with queen to d6. You can strengthen your position.
However, I don't know if okay, is there any tactical issues there? Maybe
I can't see one.
yeah.
Queen d6, queen d6, r d6.
Mm,
At the most, black can go knight e8, and I simply retreat with my rook.
maybe something like I don't know, knight h4. I mean 5, knight h5.
Right.
Maybe something like that is
I'll just go
possible.
rook d1 in that position.
Yeah, it's obviously bad for
Knight on d7 is
yeah, it's
protected.
pretty obviously bad for black, but jettisoning something and trying to be active is the best you can do in such positions, I think. Okay,
So,
anyway,
yeah, white goes any3.
which is natural. Q,
qa6.
it's the position is so bad that he can't even defend.
Yeah, the point is to, of course, MP the knight on f6.
Correct. So white goes knight. He chooses knight f5, which is an empty square basically. Like
A
nobody.
move like this actually demonstrates how overwhelming the white position is.
Yeah,
Can
and
just take
it
his
all
own-
stemmed from this point. It all stemmed from this particular point when
Knight into d6 was played. And d6.
yeah, actually it all stemmed out from this particular point. You just had to waste a move here. When
Yeah,
you,
with e6, e5.
it first started from here. You wasted a tempo more than what is not natural. You had e6, you went e5. So, so that is one thing. And then the weaknesses just spoke for themselves.
It's impressive how the play just naturally flows from this position.
Yeah, and of course b4, the Axel Smith point. No pawn
Pawn
levers,
lever.
no pawn levers, no
It's
plans.
impressive, you said. Excellent.
Yeah, so okay, this is just advantage and win already. I won't be surprised unless white blunders. There's no way in the world you can lose this position. It's so overwhelmingly advantageous.
Like white is just controlling every
Okay.
part of the board.
So maybe we'll try to go to some other game, but it's very easy. Yeah, maybe we'll try to go to some other game. Let's see. We'll try and find some other games in the like. We just have to hold on for a while. Let's see.
This tournament is progress in Mount Litera School International, and this is one of the most famous schools here in Mumbai. And had it not been for this school, we would never have such a beautiful venue.
Correct, that's true.
It's totally world-class venue, fantastic facilities.
Yeah. So yes, speaking of facilities, that is why the not just the facilities. Okay, these facilities, the high price fund, and the ambience, the food, the quality of the place, and the quality of the opposition. All these things coupled together have resulted in a situation where the kids basically are fighting each other for, I mean, glory, and it's very good. It's a good sign, I'd say.
Not to forget the wooden boards, because here in India we generally don't have
Yeah,
wooden
we
boards.
play on normal Rexin boards, which okay. After we look when we go to chess base and see photos of players rated 2000 or something like that playing on wooden boards, we feel like, oh, we live in a village. But when you come and play a tournament like IIFL Wealth Mumbai International for Open and Juniors, you realize that, oh, we aren't really living in a village. Our place is also pretty good enough. So yeah, it's a very good sign, and
Very nice.
I think the fact that IIFL has pledged this tournament to be conducted for the next 5 years is a very good sign. I think it's very good what's happening in Mumbai chess.
The event from here on will just get bigger.
Yeah, it
There's
just
no way
gets
to
better, and like
Bigger
it's
and better.
becoming more exciting day by day. All right, so okay, we finally found this game, which I think is pretty interesting. It's basically the second board game between Bhuta Hriday.
It's not the second board game.
Oh, maybe it's
the
the
fourth board game.
yes.
White is Hriday Buddha and black is candidate master Gukesh D.
Now Gukesh D, I kind of know this kid. This Boy is extremely talented. In fact, this morning when we were interviewing Swapnil Dhopade, who is a grandmaster, while interviewing Swapnil Dhopade, well, it turned out that first of all, Swapnil was playing Gukesh D. It needs to be noted at this point that Gukesh is playing not just in the junior category of this tournament, but also the open category. So basically, he's playing 18 games in 9 days.
18 games in 9 days, well enough.
Tiring, but he's a kid and he's very talented. And I think it's only natural that for him it's like a hunting ground. 18 games in 9 days means 100 points, 100 euro points.
Can definitely expect 300.
It may become 300 if he plays exceedingly well. And no, this kid from Tamil Nadu is a very good candidate to win this tournament even because I feel that he's underrated. Swapnil Dhopade, the grandmaster, he pointed out that Gukesh is basically a positional player and he likes to play positionally and he plays stuff like Reti and all, which is a bit positional in nature and involves a lot of pawn breaks. Even with Black, as far as I remember, he plays Hippo.
Hippopotamus.
Hippo and Shubham, you have some experience with Hippo.
Well, yeah, I would like to emphasize on Hippo then.
Yeah.
The hippopotamus structure is characterized by black pawns or maybe white pawns.
Yeah.
There are 2 pawns on A and B files,
Yeah.
C and D, and
Yeah,
G and H. For example,
yeah.
for black it will be A6, B6, then D6, E6,
Yeah.
and G6, F6. With the knights coming to E7 and D7, bishops to B7 and G7.
It's very cute. It looks very cute and it looks exactly like a hippopotamus.
It looks passive, but it's not passive. The
Yeah.
idea is to provoke white into doing something and making him, extend beyond his reach.
Again, the Axel Smith idea is very famous even there. I mean, pawn breaks.
Pawn breaks, yes.
Pawn breaks are the key.
There are a host of pawn breaks for black in that position.
Yeah,
Your C5, your D5, your E5, and F5 is possible.
From that point, I came to realize that Gukesh is somebody who likes to do a lot of pawn breaks. Let's see how this game went. Maybe we'll find a lot of pawn breaks here as well, although I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's only one.
Early into the game.
Yeah, let's start with this game between Bhuta Hriday and Gukesh D. If you look at the times, White has 28 minutes left, 27 minutes left, and Gukesh has around an hour left, which is a good
So
sign.
almost double for him.
Yeah, it's a good sign for Gukesh, not so good for White. Okay, let's move
Let's
ahead.
look at the game. C4.
Okay, before we move on, let's point out to the readers that White is also extremely underrated. He's rated only 1315, and his opponent Gukesh is rated 2041. Another interesting thing to note to our dear readers, we are analyzing to our dear viewers. Basically, since I have been writing for ChessBase for a while now, I'm used to calling my viewers readers because my viewers are usually readers. So this is a new experience.
He's not just writer for ChessBase, he's the editor of ChessBase India.
Well, yeah. So, okay. Speaking of ChessBase, I think we should just point out to our viewers that we are analyzing the games. We are watching the games on the Play Chess website, which is basically the part of ChessBase. It's ChessBase, in other words. And okay, it's only one word, Play Chess. Oh, it's ChessBase, in other words.
It's synonymous.
It's synonymous, correct. Okay, speaking of this game, let's see.
Let us have a look at the game. Maybe.
Right from the opening, yeah, D4.
Let us just go back a bit and go
Yeah.
by move. D4, D5.
Yeah,
C4, E6.
yeah.
Knight
C3.
C6. So this characterizes the semi-slower defense against Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, there are many. It's a very rich opening setup. It's also known as the triangle setup.
Triangle setup. There's a book on this opening by, I think, Skakchev.
Yeah, that's a very famous book. True. I had a look at this book around some 6 months back, and I came to realize how less I know about chess.
Not to forget, Indian star Vishy Anand prefers playing semi-slow.
Yeah, that's something of note. Even that is something of note. Okay, let's look at this opening then. C4, yeah,
E6.
the triangle setup. Here we have it.
C6,
E4.
E4.
Now this idea was played by,
Botvinnik, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, first by Botvinnik. It's basically known as the Marshall variation, I think.
Yes.
And it was also used by Carlsen against Anand in one of his World Championship matches. I think the one in Sochi, and even in Chennai, where White somehow managed to outplay Black. I mean, Carlsen somehow managed to outplay Anand from this position, although it's supposed to be decent for black. Let's see how this
Okay.
game went.
And,
Marshall.
game D into E4, knight into E4, bishop B4, knight C. Okay.
Okay.
Extreme sorry.
Yeah. The
Let
thing
me go
is,
back.
since you're watching the games live, when the
Move.
moves come across, we get the move immediately. So basically, that disturbs our analysis. But okay, never mind.
All
Let's
right.
move
And
forward.
into E4, bishop B4, knight C3. So this is exactly what was played in Chennai, the Carlson against Anand.
Yeah.
Let us point over here is that bishop D2 is the main move over here.
Yeah. Bishop.
It's the more attacking option.
Yeah.
Trying to capture the pawn on D4.
Yes, and white has very good scores even here. Like there's a sample variation which starts with bishop D2. Okay.
Q into D4.
Yeah, Q into D4.
Bishop
And
B4.
this becomes extremely sharp now. Let's see, bishop into B4, and the fun part begins now. There are some crazy lines here with something like Q into E4 check, bishop E2, and knight A6. Bishop A5. By the way, there's a very funny move here. Bishop F8.
Yeah.
The point is, can you see the point?
Yeah, bishop F8 runs into king into F8, queen D8 checkmate.
Q D8 checkmate. That's exactly the point. And it's very funny how this move works. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it works. Bishop F8. It's like a shocking move.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I've actually seen a game in a tournament have go like this, and when the game was, I think, in Pune, and both the players were rated around 1800 and 2000, and one of the players played bishop f8, and the black player just stared at the board in disbelief, like, what on earth is this? How on earth did the bishop come to f8?
It's certainly a move that will broaden your chess vision.
Yeah, it's very creative and funny even. Okay, the obvious point, of course, is you cannot take on f8 because that runs into qd8.
It's not just a D8 checkmate. Bishop is also threatening to capture on G7.
Yeah, so the right move here is supposed to be knight e7, which leads to a draw. First draw, many people claim. Let's see, the variation is bishop into G7. I think the next move is pretty natural. Rook G8. Okay, now comes the. Okay, again we have been interrupted by the move, but okay, let's go back to that particular point. Rook G8, bishop F6. Yeah, fighting position. However, something which is known to be equalish, dynamically equalish, but equalish nevertheless.
In the age of computers, this new term has come about.
Yeah.
It's dynamically equalish.
Yeah, the dynamically equalish positions are positions where the position is equal, however, anything can go wrong.
Yeah.
Or
slip here and there, and you might just be lost immediately.
Talking about equality, there's a very funny story which comes to mind. It so happened that Praveen Thipse, by the way, is a grandmaster from Mumbai, and
he was third grandmaster.
Yeah, he was a very strong player in his at his peak. Nowadays, he's more into not playing chess. However, he used to play chess. Yeah, he's a bank manager in the Union Bank of India, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's Union Bank of India. Okay, not just it's not just Praveen, his brother Abhay Thipse,
who happens to be a lawyer.
Who happens to be not just a lawyer, who happens to be a judge in the Bombay High Court. He's also a decently strong chess player. In fact, pretty strong chess player. The story is like this. The Praveen Thipse was playing with a gentleman who was a guest to his house, and Abhay was watching the game. So Praveen played the black side of a certain variation, and this gentleman was white, and they played a game, and Praveen won.
All right.
Not so surprising. The gentleman said, "Okay, the position is supposed to be equal after the opening, but Praveen Thipse won." They changed colors. They played the same opening again. However, this time Praveen Thipse was white, and his opponent, the gentleman, was black. They exchanged colors and they played. And it turns out that Praveen Thipse won again.
That is not surprising for me.
So this gentleman was like, the opening book says that the position is equal. And how did white win one game and black did one another game? How is that possible if the position is supposed to be equal? That's when Praveen's brother Abhay Thipse came in and said, look, white won one game and black won one game, so equal.
That's very interesting.
It's although it sounds a bit funny. However, if you think about
Definitely, but
it makes a good point
it's a
there.
very good point. Opening books will give you lots of evaluations. White might be terribly better. But it is not necessary that he should win the game. It depends on the quality of your play after the opening.
Yeah, and the Abhijit's point really, although it's very funny, it makes a lot of sense because yeah, white wins one game, black wins one game. Yeah, it's equal.
It's equal. Quite natural.
And
Quite logically.
yeah, okay. So we'll leave this position at this point after rook g6, dynamically equal. If you look at the position, yeah, it is equal. In fact, I mean everything looks equal and extremely messy even because
Muddy waters.
look at the queen on e4 and the rook on g6, but look at the bishop on c8.
And the king is both the kings uncastled. Rook is out.
Yeah, for white, look at the pawn on c4 and look at the pawn on bishop on f6. However, then look at the king on e1 and
I think
the rook.
everything here seems to be against the laws of chess as far as black's position is concerned.
Yeah.
However, black is still not bad.
Yeah, black is still not bad. In fact, black has a very good very good results from this position. Let's see a sample variation with the there's a sample variation possible here with bishop into e7 and I mean I don't know what to say. I mean black actually has a very good score in this position. King into e7 looks extremely messy, but it still has a very good position after qd2 e5. The idea is very natural. If you ask yourself in this position, which is the worst placed piece black has, what is the piece which comes to your mind?
Bishop on c8 for sure. It's blocked by two pawns. C6 and e6.
Yeah, bishop on c8 for sure. And there's a saying that if in a basket one apple is bad, the whole basket becomes bad. Yeah. Here, since the bishop on c8 is bad, the rook on e8 is bad.
Yeah.
So I think it's only natural that when the bishop improves, the rook will improve.
Let us note one point for the viewers. Queen into g2 trying to win the rook on h1 is not an idea.
Yeah.
Because of bishop f3.
And that's like sad.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah, e5 makes a lot of sense here, which is what the variation goes like. e5, white goes rook d1, a natural move, and
bishop has to come out.
e6, again a natural square. f3 because somebody needs to save the pawn and somebody also needs to attack the queen because it's very active there. Okay, qf4, g4.
This is there's just one game in this position.
Yeah, and black has a very good position here.
g4 looks pretty.
I mean,
I'm not sure about this.
No, how else will you defend the g pawn against the pressure on g5? Again, rook g8 is a threat.
That's true. That's true.
So I think g4 is natural, in fact. Although the position of this is just better for black. So it's very funny how the game develops after bishop f8. Although it looks extremely cute,
it's not
with the mate threat. I mean, bishop into f8, qd8. It's a very, I mean, it's a dream mate. But okay, if the variation goes forward, black is the one who ends up with some trumps, as you can see in this position.
So let us just go behind a bit, and for the interested viewers here, bishop f8 is not the best of the moves.
Of course.
Bishop a5 is. Again threatening a checkmate on d8.
Yeah, and again it's a very cute move if you look at it. Bishop
a5, very nice.
Yeah, it's a very cute move.
So black has to go b6, and I think bishop e.
Black is forced.
b6 is forced, and I think bishop c3 is the variation.
Okay, there are moves, to stupid moves like f6, but f6 isn't that bad as it looks, no? I mean,
has been played
before
almost as many times as b6.
Yeah, it doesn't look as bad because although it looks extremely suspicious. Bishop a5, yeah, I will go there.
I think maybe it's time we return to the main theme because the game is developing pretty quickly.
Yeah, although it's very interesting.
Let's go back to knight c3.
Yeah, so yes. This was the point.
Okay, so knight c3 has been played, c5 following the Carlsen game.
Yeah, I mean, interesting.
C5. Okay, let me tell you this. When the Carlsen game was played, knight c3 completely shocked me. because I had never seen that move being played. Bishop D2 was the main line. And since this game, this line has particularly gone up in its popularity.
Because Carlsen played it.
Yeah, Carlsen played it.
And
several grandmasters incorporated it in their repertoires, and it's becoming, I think, the main line of this variation. Surprisingly,
it's very strange how a world champion plays something and becomes
a whole difference. So knight f3.
Yeah.
Knight f6. Natural developing moves.
Yeah, a3. Now I think there are two possibilities: bc3, b5. Now bc3 means
b5 is a possibility.
Yeah, bc3, bishop c3 makes sense only if you have a pawn on d6. However, you don't have it. I mean, if there's a pawn on d6, there's always a chance that you can just go bishop into c3, b into c3, then e5, close the position after d5, and then go b6, bishop a6, attack c4. This
is the idea in Nimzo.
Yeah, basically it's called the Hubner wall.
Yeah,
the Hubner wall, and Hubner was a German grandmaster, by the way, who invented the wall.
It's also known as the German Petrosian.
Yeah, German Petrosian. Not surprising that he found such a plan then. Okay. It makes sense to play bishop c3 if there's a pawn on d6, so that you can break with e5 and continue with b6, bishop a6, and even the knight c6, knight a5 attacking c4. However, in this position, it's not so is not the case, because there's no pawn on d6, which means we can always put a bishop on c7, and it turns out that c7 is a very good square after you put in a6, of course, because if you put on the bishop on c7 without a6, then that's knight b5. And that's extremely, like, it's a bit suspicious. However, bishop a5, a6, bishop c7, it's a very good idea.
It's a very good idea. Bishop a5 and maybe at times d into c5, and then you can capture bishop into c3. That is seen in certain variations.
There's another possibility. Since you said dc5, you can always put the bishop on b6 as well.
b6, okay. So let's move forward. Bishop e5.
Bishop g5.
Bishop g5 again.
Again, I think white is threatening stuff like d5 here.
Yeah, it's simply developing aggressively here. Bishop g5, knight c6, d into c5.
I'm not sure about this position. Just have a look at this position.
d5 does come to mind.
Yeah, d5 looks like
it looks a bit premature to me.
I don't know. d5 takes knight d5. Oh, knight d. I mean, okay, cd5. Okay, d5, ed5, cd5 is qd5 a possibility?
c5.
Yeah, qd5.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
D5
the knight on c3 being pinned, it's a possibility.
So maybe because due to tactical reasons. However, I don't know. Yeah, due to tactical reasons, maybe it's not working.
It's right.
The point is that I mean, d5, ed5, cd5, qd5. Of course, knight d5 ain't possible because there's an absolute pin here. And if q d5, then knight d5. If bishop into f6, then we have an intermediate move with q into d1. Check, which makes sure that we get back the bishop on f6 anyway.
Rook into d1 and g into f6 with almost an equal position.
Yeah. I think it's more than just equal. I think black is better here.
May very well be the case.
Because the pawn up.
Oh yeah.
That's the point. The whole point why d5 is not working. Right?
All right.
Yeah. So maybe because of this variation, he went d into c5.
D into c5.
But white did think for knight 10, almost 10 minutes here. Maybe he was calculating stuff with d5.
Yes, because it's definitely a natural instinct to play.
Yeah, it's something we should play in blitz and then see, oh, I lost a pawn.
And well, according to the point noted, d into c5 has been played, and now bishop into c3.
Interesting. Now you have three triple pawns on the c5.
Triple pawn.
This is something to remember. I mean, the position. Just go ahead.
Something that you don't see in books.
Yeah. B to c3, and it's a very interesting position. There are 3 pawns on the c file. The d file is open. Okay, after q into d1, I think q into d1, rook into d1. I'm not sure what the position is like. However,
queen into d1, rook into d1 does look better for white, with black being underdeveloped.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, look at white structure.
It sure is funny. However, it does allow him to
when was the last, I mean, tell me, when was the last time you saw positions with 3 pawns in the c5? 3 pawns in the same file.
I have to recollect a bit.
I mean, I don't remember seeing this kind of position for a long while now. 3 pawns on the same file.
I think I last saw this position in Limzo Indian with the same idea: d into c5 and bishop into c5.
Yeah, there are some variations.
It is seen in a Rubinstein variation.
Yeah, there are some variations there, true. However, I think in the knight comes to f3.
F3.
Yeah.
There are two options. You come to F3, you come to G8.
Yeah, there are, yeah.
E2
So
as well.
okay, that's one variation with this e.
Yeah.
Okay, QA5, however, is a very
QA5
natural
quite natural.
because it's a weakness. Plus the bishop on G5, the pawn on C5, the pawn on C3. Q on A5 is just a natural move because you attack a lot of things in one go, and also you unpin the knight.
So here queen into C3, yes, it's a very potent idea.
Yeah, because QC2 something like I don't know.
Q into Q into C3, QD2 just runs into queen into A1.
I mean now QA5, now QC2, then I think black can play knight E4.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Knight E4, I think is possible.
Yeah, it's possible. Then white has to reiterate with bishop D2.
Bishop D2, and then you simply go knight D2 is advantage for
yeah,
black.
Yeah.
Because knight D2,
The last
Q2,
black
Q2,
to
C5.
against white's weakened pawn structure.
Yeah, I mean if BD2 then knight D2, QD2, QC5, black has an advantage.
So queen
E5 comes.
Yeah, it's played. Queen into C5.
Why not knight E4 here? I mean, it looks possible. I think it looks possible.
Sure, it looks possible. Is there something I missing? Knight E4.
Knight E4. Why not knight E4?
Alright.
I think it's quite possible.
Surely isn't there. Did black just miss it? It's a possibility that black just missed this.
I don't know. Maybe it's just equal anyway. Or are we missing something? Knight E4, Q E4, Q C3. What? Knight E4, Q E4 is not possible. That means.
Yeah.
And oh wait, what else? What else? I
can't seem to find anything.
Anything wrong with knight?
Yeah, I can't seem to find anything wrong.
Yeah, knight E4. Okay, knight E4. Maybe you just continue with something like bishop D3.
Okay, that's a very interesting move because knight to C3 runs into bishop D2.
Correct. So you have to go knight G5 then, because the knight on E4 is attacked.
Yeah.
So knight G5, knight G5.
Okay, let us look at knight E4, bishop D3, queen into C3. And
Check.
I think queen into C3.
No. Q into C3, Q C3, knight E6, knight C3, and king D2.
Yeah, you can play king D2 and.
I don't know. Knight will run to A4 then. Maybe then you can.
Okay, the knight will be awkwardly placed, and I think the knight is soon falling. I don't.
Why not? Yeah, maybe. Can you try bishop C2? Maybe I'm not sure, but maybe you can try that. Or let's see. Okay, can we make a move here? Can you make a move here?
Apparently, we are having some troubles with making moves.
Yeah, we cannot really make a move here, which is sad.
It's a bit difficult to explain the variations.
Yeah. However, I think these problems will be sorted out next time when we go online, probably tomorrow. Okay, for now, let's stick to what we've got.
Yeah, let us just move on to the game continuation.
Yes. Yeah, speaking of knight E4, I thought this was interesting. Knight E4, bishop D3. If QC3, maybe, yeah, QC3, knight C3. Now, I think maybe bishop C2 is a plan. I'm not sure though.
Surely it looks plausible. Controls the square A4, threatening king D2.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. How can you find a way to escape for the black?
Specifically.
F5.
Okay, you take away the E4 square.
King D2. Yes, this is almost winning for white after bishop C2. Bishop C2, F5 if, then simply key D2. Then you go knight E4, bishop into E4, F into E4, knight G5 winning. I think, if not, but I think if not winning, it's better.
It's better. Yeah. So let us move forward. QC5 was played. Bishop E2. I think a natural move. E5, opening with the bishop on C8.
This is a natural idea.
Idea.
We saw something similar in the earlier variation as well.
Indeed.
Again, it's in fact just a question of asking yourself which is the worst placed piece.
Indeed.
And you get to know that the bishop on C8 is a worst placed piece. Time to improve it. By the way, I think what Bukesh chose is something very simple and straightforward. Knight E4 is unnecessary complications, I suppose, especially after we saw that variation with bishop C2. So Q into C5 looks very simple. Attacking the G5 bishop, planning something like.
I think that's a sign of typical positional player. It prefers the simpler route.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you cannot really take on g5 immediately. However, something like e5, bishop f3, and then bishop into f3, and then suddenly there are tactical possibilities with the g5 bishop
The
being
point to be
lost.
noted is Semislav is basically based on two ideas. You are involved d into c4, bishop into c4, b5 idea, and
Yeah,
then the other idea is playing e5.
yeah.
E5 is like the heart of Semislav.
The point is always to improve the bishop somehow.
Yes.
The problem bishops, in such structures with the pawns on right squares, that I mean, even in the French, in the Khan of Khan, everywhere, this bishop is the problem bishop, the cursed bishop. It's only natural that the cursed bishop stands on the c8 square, c4, c8, c4 cursed.
Nice point.
Okay, so okay,
Alright.
black goes to black goes ahead with e5,
Castling has been played.
and well,
Okay, again, we need to just adjust it.
yeah, we need to adjust this thing a bit. I think
We need to adjust the plates. Okay, we'll just move forward.
we were
Bishop into e5.
we were here castles.
Castles.
Yeah,
Knight d7. This is
you know,
surely
this is interesting. Yeah, I mean naturally, if you remove everything and ask some guy on a d7, like if it were Christmas, which square would you head towards? I mean, what would you think? Like, remove every piece and just let the pawn structures be. And if the knight on f6, of course, the knight on f6 is the most uncomfortable piece here, because of which black cannot castle, because of which the rook on h8 cannot become active. Because if I castle to make the rook on h8 active, the f6 knight can be taken, and the pawns will be doubled, the king will be weak. So the whole point is that how to make that thing active. So probably to make the h8 look active, I need to remove the knight on
f6.
and
I think
if I
regard
ask,
to this point, you cannot immediately capture on f6. I mean, you can. However, bishop into f6, g into f6, you just allow.
yeah, I mean, the point is always that black cannot castle immediately.
Yeah. So bishop into f6, g into f6, and you open up the g file, which surely can help black in the future.
Correct. So yeah, in this case it's not possible, but the whole point is that white castled, because of which it is possible. But the problem is that even black can't castle immediately because of bishop into f6. And a move like h6 is something which makes you, I mean, think about the position after something like, I don't know, there are two possibilities here, good possibilities. I mean, bishop e3 and bishop
e3
h4.
is surely a possibility.
But I'd prefer to keep the bishop on h4 for some reason, for some intuitive reason.
e3 looks quite interesting.
E3 looks, yeah, E3 is interesting, of course. However, let's go back to the position. Black cannot castle without disturbing the pawn structure, it seems, because of which he ended up playing knight d7, which exactly illustrates Swapnil Dopade's point. I mean, Swapnil talked about Gukesh being a positional player, and he even predicted a bright future for Gukesh because his positional understanding is quite better on the favorable side compared to other youngsters.
It's not natural to find youngsters with a positional style.
Yeah, here I think it's a question of giving a Christmas present to this knight. I mean, if we just keep the pawn structures intact and just the knight on f6 intact and ask the knight on f6, if it were Christmas, where would you head to? I think he'd call out that I want to be on the c5 square.
Yes, very true.
And there's another possibility. Even since the pawn on c4 is weak, and if we can make sure that the pawn won't head to c5, we can also keep the knight on b6 square.
Yeah, knight b6 and you play bishop e6.
And attack the
c4 pawn.
Yeah, that's a possibility. That's always a possibility. And in fact, funny thing is, you can even add the fuel to fire by playing knight e5. So knight b6, knight a5, bishop e6, and suddenly c4 pawn is like,
it's just doomed.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think it's almost close to winning after if black gets in that plan.
All right. So bishop d3. The idea is if black tries to castle in this position, bishop into h7 is a simple reply.
And now since the pawn is anyway attacked and you cannot castle anyway, he goes at 6 and disturbs the bishop. And since he doesn't have a target on f6, I think it's only natural.
h6, bishop e3, taking the queen on c5.
e7.
Queen goes back. E11. Rook vis-a-vis the queen.
Yeah, and black castles. It's very interesting what white played here, and I think I kind of like this move. Now this guy is underrated. I think after seeing this move, I knew that this guy was lower rated. However, after looking at the move, let's have a look at this move. Bishop e3, to e7, rook fe1, short castle, c5.
C5. The move C5 secures the D6 square to start with.
But however, the pawn is falling.
Yeah.
So I think knight into c5. The whole point is, I think, go ahead.
Okay.
The whole point is, c5, knight into c5. The whole point is that you're trying to pressurize the
E5 pawn. E5 pawn is the target right now.
Yeah, and not just the e5 pawn. There's a rook on e1 and the queen on e7.
Yes.
And the knight on c6 is basically the protecting the e5 pawn. So the whole point, I think, is to pressure on the e file after attacking the knight on c6. Yeah, it's a good idea, not
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Follow up is very impressive. Bishop d7.
Maintains equality, if nothing. I don't know. I'm not sure about this. Okay, fine. Maybe the whole point is that you win back the pawn.
Yes. So bishop into c6, bishop into c5, queen into c5, rook into e.
Okay, rook into e5. I think. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Rook into e5.
Looks like a possibility.
Yes, attacks the queen. Maybe it's better than what he played. However, there is a questions here. For example, what if q d6?
Q d6, exactly the point I'm looking at. I think rook e3 or rook f5 looks like a...
Yeah.
Rook d1 short is not possible because of queen into a3.
Actually, rook d1, then bishop into yeah, of course, correct.
Yeah, and
Queen into a3.
Queen into a3 also makes possible the threat of bishop a4, skew with bishop.
Yeah, that's a tactic. In fact, I'm very weak with that kind of tactics.
Skewer.
Yeah, skewer is okay, but I have a very long history of losing to, losing to something along that diagonal.
Oh,
I have got my queen trapped and whatnot in that
diagonal.
diagonal.
It's an awkward diagonal.
I always forget about that diagonal for some reason. It doesn't exist in the map of inside my mind.
Fatalism.
I don't know. Okay, but then probably I'm just a weak player. It's not just probably, I am a weak player.
Knight into e5.
Okay, this guy, the white, is trying to somehow eliminate the knight. Maybe he feels that it will give him an equal position, and
He's trying to eliminate the bishop.
I think he's just trying to hold a draw here.
Yeah, he's definitely trying to do that, trying to eliminate the bishop on c6.
Black is a more comfortable position.
As we know, bishops are better in open positions.
Yeah.
He's trying to eliminate the piece, which is the...
And knight on e5 is very impressive anyway. Looks good.
Even knight d3, c4, c5 can be an idea.
Yeah, this position looks very impressive. Going ahead.
Okay, let's go ahead, and rook e8 is played, attacking the knight on e5. Knight into c6, queen into c6. Okay, capturing with the pawn here is completely a mistake.
Yeah.
Just release the pressure on the c3 pawn.
Yeah, the funny thing here is, it's again something impressive to note that 11-year-old child is ready to give up a bishop like this. Normally you would want to keep the bishop as long as possible, but it appears that Gokesh doesn't have any materialistic, wants, like I want to keep the bishop. Here he's ready to give it up because black has a better pawn structure and consequently an advantage. A slight static advantage it may be, however,
Pieces are exchanged, and a king endgame,
yeah,
appears on the board.
Yeah, black has better
chances.
chances.
And
Black has better chances. Correct.
So rook d1, d8. Sorry, we just have to go back again.
Yeah, we need to go back again here. As we just mentioned a few moments back, the moves just come to us directly, because of which we have to be on our toes all the time, like this. Okay, q into c6, rook a d1, a natural move. It's still close to equality. However, black has a slight plus nevertheless, but a plus nevertheless.
Yes. In practical play, it's definitely a better position.
Yeah, the pawn on c3 and a3, it's a question. What will you do with those pawns? That's the question. You need to always keep it and defend those pawns. I think that's the whole problem. And I think this is how higher rated players anyway outplay lower rated players. Be it the Grandmaster level, the World Championship level, in fact even in Carlson Anand levels, or the lower rated levels, or the level below this even. It's always the case that we see that the lower rated player somehow gets a position very close to equality objectively. However, it's
But
not
weakness,
as comfortable. It's not as comfortable. A weakness here and there, the higher rated opponent just outplays him by exploiting that
And
weakness.
they just mops up around that weakness, and the game is soon ends.
Yeah, and it's a very common pattern in almost all the levels we see. I mean,
Very
that's very funny and it's true. And okay,
That is becoming more and more, the way to defeat lower rated players, because with the advent of theory and all, players are generally well equipped with the
yeah,
opening moves.
yeah.
So what remains is outplaying the opponent positionally.
Yeah, I think yeah, this is how they do it. The higher
Yes,
rated.
yes.
Here
So
in this case, black is higher rated, and not so surprisingly, I think
it's a
that's
candidate master as well.
and
PhD.
yeah, and the Tamil Nadu boy is very talented. Okay, now moving ahead, look into D1, Q into D1 because I mean, if okay, it's tactically working
I
because
think we just jumped ahead.
did we?
Yes, yes. After rook d8, jumped ahead. H3 was played here. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We are nearing the main part of the game. Q into C6, look D1, look D8, H3. I think okay.
Just making a left for the game.
Yeah, a left. So going back. Yeah. So after H3, black went
G6, queen b3.
The idea I think is to take on E8.
In general, it activates the queen. I think the queen is better placed on b3 than on c2.
Okay, I'm not sure if Group B1 is a plan.
Rook b1 is an idea, but I don't think it's working because b6 simply nullifies this.
Yeah, I mean Rook B1, Rook into E8, and then Q. I mean A4,
True.
something like that.
I think maybe this is a move which allows white to create some play against black's pawn structure. If black wants to grab the c3 pawn, white is asking him to defend his own pawns first.
Yeah.
Yes, so I think that's a decent move. Queen b3, rook into d1, rook into d1, queen into d1 has been played.
Correct.
And the note queen into c3 is a blunder. Rook into 8. It's just a simple idea.
Yeah, of course.
So rook into even, queen into even, and here we.
I think here in this position, Q c5 is a natural move. What do you think?
Yeah,
that's exactly what
queen
was played.
c5, queen c1, and now you can simply see the superiority of black's queen over white.
Yeah, now I think King g7.
King g7 to start with.
Something like wow. How would you place the pawns here? Would you like to place the pawns on the dark squares with g5, f5, f4, or would you want to keep them on the light squares? What would you prefer?
Not too sure how the pawn configuration would work. However, to begin with King g7 definitely seems like the plan.
Yeah, because g5 is problematic after g4. I'm
not too sure about h5 in this position.
H5 is just I think okay.
Can surely be played.
Yeah, I mean you cannot. The queen is basically black is clearly better now because white's
queen is tied down to the defenses of a3 and c3 pawns, which means black has a free hand.
Yeah, and then there's always this trick with b5, a5, b4 break. The point is that a b4, and there's a relative pin again here. I think maybe it's possible. It's very funny though that white starts with the first move and ends up a tempo behind like this. Maybe
that's the difference of strength.
I think that's the difference between 700 point difference. I mean look at it. I mean look at the ratings. 1315. White is 1315 and black is 2041. But black's playing h5, almost taunting white. I think that okay, you cannot really do anything. What are you trying?
All right.
I think this is the point where the game is at.
Present
black. Objectively, the position may be equal or may not be, but of course, any player would prefer to play black.
I think it's a combination of two things here. Not only black is better in this position, he's the higher-rated player by whooping 700 points.
Yeah, so I think this is just
coupling these two things together. I think I'm only surprised to see black winning this game.
Yeah, it would be extremely surprising to see black winning this game.
It would be surprising to see my drawing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really sorry about it. Okay. In any case, I think we should take a small break
Take a
here,
small break.
and we'll be back with some more games after I think a short
Short
break. So thanks for watching this live broadcast with commentary which we have been bringing you people. We're extremely grateful for your time, and of course, you may have noticed that we were a bit fidgety and we were not really doing it with the same flow you would expect us to do. But this is our first time in such a situation, and I think for such an event, of this caliber being held in this country for the first time, I think although we can't do an amazing job, we surely will try our best and try to be pioneers. And I
The
think
commentary in itself is the first.
yeah,
It's the
is the
first time ever, and the event, junior event in India,
Yeah.
is having live commentary.
Yeah, so if
So-
not being the best is not certainly the idea. The idea is just to be pioneers and try and become better.
Indeed.
So again, thank you for your time, and we'll be back shortly.
Thank you.
What? Okay, wait.